I had a friend who once gave me some sauerkraut that she made, and it was so amazing. It was so amazing, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, why have I never eaten this? You know, she only made it once in a while. She lives in Orlando, and I was just like, I have to learn how to do this. I have to learn how to do this. And I was overwhelmed because it just sounds so technical. I mean, they have these crazy little things you have to use and all this steps you have to take. Well, I'm here to tell you, you don't have to take all those steps. First, I would like, though, to tell you about the health aspects. I didn't start it because of the health aspects. I learned about it after the fact. But, you know, it helps improve your digestion. I don't have a lot of problems with that, but I was just trying to increase my health. And I knew that it was a possibility that it was my digestion. You never know for sure unless you find out. But I had these handouts if you want to take one home with you, the benefits of fermented food. And a lot of it has to do with increasing your immunities, increasing your gut flora, that a lot of us lose because we eat, you know, have consumed by antibiotics or garbage in our food, that sort of stuff. So there's the health benefits. But I did it because it tastes good, but I also wanted to become primarily my diet to be vegetables. You know, you get tired of the same old, so I decided I had to learn all kinds of different ways to make them. So I saute them, I ferment them, and anything I can do to create flavor in my diet, because I want to eat the vegetables, but I don't want to get tired of it. And as you get tired of it, then you start eating garbage because it's easy. So I just started experimenting with flavors. I'd never used herbs because I didn't know how. I started learning how because I was growing the basil. I wasn't even eating the basil, I was growing the basil. So I started experimenting with flavors, and fermentation was another way to do it because it's such a, when I run really, really long. And I also learned that I like to take the juice after I've fermented the vegetables and drink the juice. You know, they have a juice, what's it called? What is it? Kombucha. Kombucha. And I don't know what that tastes like, but I know I love to drink the leftover. And a lot of people, when I'm racing and they're with me and they smell that, they're like, how do you drink that? It's an acquired taste, I guess. But I also use that as a beginning, as part of the next fermentation. Okay, where am I at? Equipment. What do you need to start? I personally went and purchased a kit because I was so paranoid to start. It's completely unnecessary. But it was nice to have the recipe that came with it, and they also came with these. And I'll explain that in a minute. But you don't need that. You don't need that. All you need are jars, and I use smaller leftover jars. Like this one came from Herbal Cabinet, who sells on the market. I buy her products. I save the glass, and I use that as a weight because you need a weight. And then I use a glove, a surgical glove, rather than this. The surgical glove, I know that it ferments when it waves. So it'll eventually come up and wave to me when it's fermenting. It does. Once in a while they don't, but as long as there's some air in the glove, I know that it's working. But I have pictures actually of the glove like this. So it actually does ferment. And then I have no idea where I got this, but I use this as I acquired it somewhere along the way in life, use that to push my vegetables down. And so really you don't need a whole lot more than that to ferment. You don't have to.
You need that pusher.
You could use anything. You could use a masher. You could use a dowel. You could use a small potato masher or something like that, anything to get the stuff pushed down. You could even use, a plastic container for that matter. You could use anything to push it down. This is just handy because it's got a nice little thin handle and it's easy to work with. So you don't actually have to have it. You just want to make sure that, the stuff goes down. So I'll run through the process real quick. Let's make sure I got all that stuff. Tops, gloves, pickler, slids with the flow. Oh, yeah, and maybe a container. I usually just in case I have an overflow, I don't just leave them on the counter when they're fermenting. I put them in a container because once in a while they'll overflow because the glove might disintegrate from the chemical reaction, or I might have overpacked it, and so I always put it in a container. Michael Pollan in his book talked about actually one of his exploding and hitting the roof. I haven't had that happen, so I never had to do that. The other thing that you need is water and salt, quality salt. Then when I bought my pack, this is what they sold with the pack. So I do use some Celtic sea salt, but I also use the pink Himalayan, which is sold on the market. It's the, so you could actually buy this on the market, and you know it'll dissolve in the water. And so what I do is I have a tendency to just keep a jug of water around. This is already pre-set at 2 tablespoons per 2 cups. So 2 tablespoons of salt to 2 cups of water.
So it's pre-mixed.
It's pre-mixed. I just have it sitting on my counter so that when I have extra vegetables and I'm making my dinner and there's extra vegetables, I could just make a jar out of whatever I have left over.
Any kind of water? Or distilled?
Thank you. No, spring water or distilled. I don't think you have to use distilled. I use the bottle of spring water because the stuff that comes out of your tap has too many bad chemicals in it that may hinder the fermentation process. So you should use spring water or I guess distilled water, but I use spring water. And that's all you really need to ferment. So I would do a real quick one here just to show you the different kinds of things. I have a big bag of cabbage because I like to put cabbage in a lot of my fermentation. I picked all of this stuff out of his garden this evening, out of Nathan's garden, and she's got some left over from her smoothie. I literally have some garlic that I can throw in there. I pulled some baby kale out of my garden, and just want to show you, there's a lot. I saw you throw away the stems. When I cut my broccoli tonight to make my meal, I took the stems and save it. That is like, this is, a lot of people throw this stuff out. It ferments very well. It gives the fermented food a lot more texture. There's no reason to throw this. It's terrible to waste food, and this is great for that. So we literally will just throw it. I'm going to save the organic and do the inorganic because this is for me. Literally just start throwing it in, packing it in. And cabbage, you can actually take the cabbage and take like a bowl like that and just start smashing it in the bowl, and it'll make its own brine. Because what you're needing is a brine, and that's what I have the salt there. It'll literally make its own brine. I watched a couple of YouTube videos where they took the cabbage and just squeezing it with their hands until they had fluid there. And then they just poured salt on top of it. So they didn't add water to it. It's going to make, there's a lot of water in it. So you really don't have to add a lot. So you'll see, I'll fill this completely with cabbage. And I always mix flavors. The only vegetable I found that didn't taste good was the black turnips. They were bitter. They did not ferment well. Everything else I've ever bought, daikons are incredible fermented. They're my favorite fermented food. They're better than cabbage. So when they have daikons on the market, and you're like, what would you do with that? It's like a radish, but it sweetens. And you see how much that's come down. I'm not even close. I got to just keep working that down. I'm trying. The dowel's an amazing tool. The dowel's an amazing tool. I don't know what I'd do without it because I would probably have to go like buy something similar. Particularly now that I've used it. I mean, because you could actually, if you have the wide mouth jars, which I have one here somewhere, I want to make some of this. Tina's got some wide mouth jars, and she's selling them for $1.50. So if you would like to make some tonight to take home, you're welcome to do that. But so I'm gonna do this, and I layer mine.
How do you shred the cabbage?
Sometimes I cut it with a knife, and this time I used a plane.
Shredder.
Yeah, and a shredder plane, and then but typically I just cut it with a knife because I don't want mine too small. because I'll keep my fermented foods sometimes for 7-8 months. And the longer it stays in the refrigerator, the softer it does get. But
What did you just put in there?
this was the broccoli stems. They're like this kind of leaf broccoli that I bought on the market. It's not, this isn't, but it's like this, and it just saved the stems. There's no reason to ever throw a stem away because they ferment very well if they're smashed. And I just keep throwing it in there. I like caraway for some reason. I like caraway in my fermented food. Let's see if I can get enough cabbage in there. Yeah, I'm gonna make a mess. I'm gonna have to sweep up when I'm done. Okay. And I'm just gonna, I literally like to mix lots of things in there, so I'm just gonna throw this in there. It just has to be broken up. And I would throw that in there and just let the mallet smash it. But if you put the pieces in there too big, you get that big slimy piece of food, and you don't want it too big. But I like a lot of different textures and sizes in mine when I'm eating it. So while I'm doing this, if you would like to sample one, I have one I fermented in June.
Want some help?
You're welcome to it. You can come on up and take it. I've got little teeny tiny forks, so you're welcome if you want to take a forkful and test that. That was fermented 7 months ago.
This is great.
And this is a mixture?
It says on it what it is. I think it's daikon, carrots.
Cabbage, daikon, carrot, garlic, and collard.
7 years ago.
Little cup.
Yes, and you can take a little cup if you want to.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for catching that.
What was the mix on the water again?
I was going to try to do it.
Two cups to 2 tablespoons.
2 cups of salt? No,
2 cups of water, 2 tablespoons of salt. Yeah. It's pretty easy to remember, 2 and 2.
Salt, 2 tablespoons to, so a tablespoon a cup.
Yeah. Yep.
That water mixture is
God, I love these little.
That's just a mixture. That's just like this right now I have 6 cups of water and 6 tablespoons of salt.
how much water?
I waited like a week to start.
And that's what I'll get there when I want to fill it up, and I'll show you when I get to that point.
Liquid, you know, I don't
I can't believe how much, how much you're putting in that thing.
I know.
I could probably get a head of cabbage in there. That's why it's kind of like,
So you just keep putting stuff in?
yeah, I just keep and I like the layering, so I do that way when I mix them.
I love sauerkraut.
Okay. Yeah, so this will be pretty much like a sauerkraut.
Doing that for a while.
Kale, little sauerkraut.
And what I'm doing when I'm smashing it is I'm kind of breaking it. That's what I'm going to mention, the alternatives.
Oh, we're going to try it? Oh, thank you. These are adorable little forks.
I see. I love them. I'm such a sucker for things like that. It's just
Anything that's
awful. I
little.
know.
Like the cups that you sell.
So now that I've smashed my sauerkraut down, I'm going to take and cut a leaf. I have a cabbage leaf. And I've used broccoli leaves. I have a tendency to stick with cabbage because I'm comfortable with it. Scissors. I know I have a pair of scissors right here in front of me somewhere. They're there. And I will cut this so that it will fit on top of all of that, because the important thing is to make sure that all of those vegetables stay below the level of the brine. That's the issue you run into, vegetables molding. So I'm going to get this in here and try to cover this up. And I'm going to start my brining. But I also want to let you know with the brining, I'm going to start a little bit with this because I know this is really good. I know this is really good, but I don't want to overwhelm it because this is already pretty salty and pretty briny. You can also use, this is one of my favorite things to use, but you have to use very, very small amounts. A lot of people like to lactose ferment, so I thought I'll try the goat. I use the Dancing Goat's brine. The water that she sells her her cheese in. I will use, I save this brine from my cheese, and I will put a little in certain, I probably won't put it in the cabbage, but I will put it in certain things. This is fermented lemon, and you can taste this in a minute. This was made with the goat cheese brine, and goat cheese brine and a little regular brine, and I think that's all that was in there. And I've had this for over 6 months, and over time I put it in salad dressings. I put it in